After a leak by former Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made an unusual public statement last week, admitting to Israel's backing of Palestinian gang members in Gaza. He said he was acting on advice from security officials as a way to weaken Hamas and protect Israeli soldiers. But there's more to it than that. The group, made up of criminals and at least 2 known ISIS members, is called the Abu Shabab, named after its leader, Yasser Abu Shabab. They are being positioned as Hamas's newest rival, but Hamas has since hit back at the gang, claiming to, quote, assassinate them in the range of 5 to 7 a day. Despite only having about an estimated 300 members in their ranks, the group appears to be gradually growing in the Strip, or so it seems. Sources have told The National that they're armed with assault rifles, walkie-talkies, and even night vision goggles. So who is this group that seemingly came out of nowhere, and what is their role in Gaza? The gang has long been viewed with suspicion by Gaza's residents. Even Yasser Abu Shabab's own family, the Tarabin, has distanced itself from him, releasing a statement disowning him over what they say is his collaboration with Israel. Abu Shabab has rejected the accusations, but experts observing the situation on the ground have said it would be almost impossible for the group to move freely and control parts of the Strip without Israel's backing, support, and protection. This is Beyond the Headlines, and I'm your host, Nada Al-Tahir. In this episode, we break down who the Abu Shabab forces are, what their role is in Gaza, and we look back at their origins and ask why they are surfacing now as the enclave witnesses its darkest days yet. First and foremost, how does a gang suddenly appear in the middle of all the fighting and chaos and desperation? Unless it's not so sudden. To learn more about Abu Shabab, I'm joined by one of the leading experts on the topic, Gazan political analyst Mohammed Shahade. He's a visiting fellow with the European Council on Foreign Affairs MENA program. I asked him to explain exactly who this group is and how they came to be.
Last year, the name Abu Shabab started to emerge inside Gaza itself. Rumors, allegations that he was running a gang behind looting the vast majority of aid that was coming into Gaza. Those rumors became cemented at some point in November when Hamas ambushed his gang members, killed his brother Fathi and 22 others. The day after, Abu Shabab burned a truck, according to the Financial Times, burned down a fuel truck and closed the main route for humanitarian aid going into Gaza. The UN, in an internal memo, they named Abu Shabab specifically, saying that he was running a gang that was responsible for looting the overwhelming majority of aid in Rafah under, quote, active or passive IDF protection. According to that UN memo, they set up a military complex in Rafah after the IDF had depopulated it completely and turned it into, quote, an extermination zone. So for Israel to allow such a gang to operate in close proximity to its soldiers and troops, literally they would steal the aid in front of Israeli tanks less than 100 meters away, according to Haaretz, the Israeli main left-wing newspaper. And to see Israel allowing all of this, it meant only one thing, that this gang is working in tandem, collaborating with the IDF. So that was the long suspicion. But we recently had it confirmed by Israel's former defense minister, Avigdor Lieberman, that said that Israel has been arming, providing money, equipment, protection, logistical support, shelter, to those very gangs that are looting aid. And he was panicking about it because he said, we are providing weapons to ISIS members in Gaza. What guarantee is there that they wouldn't turn against us after the war is over?
So, brings me to my next question. What is the correlation between Abu Shabab and ISIS?
Basically, I've been trying to map out senior members of this gang. And up until now, virtually every single name I've come across is either someone on the run from authorities for a crime of murder or collaborating with Israel, or a drug dealer, or a member of ISIS. For example, Assam Nabahian, one of the senior members of the gang, his name is more famous in Egypt than in Gaza itself because Egyptian media like Mada Masr, they did some investigative reporting in 2017 and his name came up as an ISIS member that joined ISIS from Gaza, traveled to Sinai and started launching attacks against the Egyptian military. At some point, he returned to Gaza, and in June 2023, he was detained for killing a policeman After this, he was held in prison, convicted, and then October 7th happens. Lots of prisoners escape. Others are released on parole by local authorities out of fear of Israel bombing prisons. And then the name comes up as a member of the Abu Shabab gang. Israel itself, in Yadrot Ahranot, they name him as basically an ISIS member who was even firing rockets on Israel without Hamas's approval prior to October 7th. Another member that Israel itself names is the deputy leader of this gang, Ghassan Haney. His brother Walid was an ISIS member implicated in kidnapping an Israeli soldier in 2006. Haney, according to local sources in Gaza, was a lieutenant in the security forces. He was excommunicated or a former member of those security forces. Then he joined what is called Jaish al-Islam. Jaish al-Islam is an ISIS-allied extremist group in Gaza that was responsible for kidnapping a BBC journalist, Alan Johnston. So now having Israeli media admitting this on record, saying that we are arming a bunch of drug dealers, criminals, ISIS members, and murderers, and saying that Israel's Shin Bet, the internal security agency, is the one that's arming and recruiting them.
What's the purpose of this? And is this the first time that Israel arms and protects gangs like this in Gaza or in Palestinian territories?
Israel has been trying since October 7th to do this particular kind of work, create subcontractors, create sort of proxies on the ground in Gaza, while giving Netanyahu plausible deniability for atrocities in that sense. They tried with tribal leaders, community leaders, technocrats, academics, business people, different company owners, etc. Nobody was willing to collaborate because you're basically taking part in a genocide against your own people. So Israel instead turned to those people that are on the run from authorities. And basically, Netanyahu found a perfect match for himself. Now you have Israel trying to whitewash running those proxies by saying that we are creating them as rivals to Hamas. But that's not what's happening. They didn't engage in any major battles against Hamas. There are about 300 members. They are no match. They cannot overpower Hamas's about 30,000 militants on the ground. According to Israel, it's even 40,000 militants in Hamas.
We have heard also different ways that Abu Shabab has been reportedly or allegedly serving the Israeli army. What is this group?
We see those gangs basically doing different jobs. Number one, maintain starvation. So whenever Israel is pressured to allow food into Gaza, as we've seen in late May by European and American pressure, Israel would immediately unleash those gangs to loot the very little aid that they allowed into Gaza so that they can externalize blame and say, look, it's not us. We're letting food in. Food is going in. Stop trying to pressure us to end the war. It's not us. It's those gangs that are looting the aid. It's Hamas. It's the UN not doing good enough job to protect its own aid convoys. And the second use is basically Israel using them to collapse Gaza from within, to create complete societal collapse, lawlessness, destroying law and order, societal cohesion, any fabric that binds Gazans together. There were footage that came out 2 days ago of just a young man carrying a bag of wheat flour on the street. Then he gets stopped by gang members with a knife. They take away the wheat flour, beat him up, and keep going. And when you engineer this, when you destroy a society from within, it is the quickest way to unleash genocide, to maintain Gaza not just as a wasteland totally destroyed and uninhabitable, but to destroy society, that people can no longer coexist with one another, that they would start looking for options to leave. And then the third use that Israel has for those gangs is to carry out missions on behalf of the IDF, like reconnaissance, intelligence, interrogating and kidnapping people. There's a forensic Palestinian journalist, Yunus Tarawi, who documented one such a case where the gang lured someone by a promise of aid. Then they kidnapped him, interrogated him about some distant relative, and no news has emerged of that elderly man ever since. The IDF is also using them. Whenever they go into a dangerous area, they would first send drones, and then they would send the sniffer dogs, and then the soldiers would go in. Now they changed the hierarchy. They would send those gangs, and then the drones, and then the sniffer dogs, and then the soldiers. And then the last use is now advancing the final phase of genocide. Those gangs created a concentration camp in eastern Rafah, an encampment area, where they are telling people, if you want food, come here. And they're using the very food that they've been looting for so long to lure people into this trap close to Egypt's borders. As Israel's finance minister admitted, we will keep pushing people there, destroy everything that's left of Gaza, and then kick them out to Egypt and other countries.
What is the end game for the group? What do they benefit?
They are given a very simple message by Israel. If you want a second chance, you don't want to end up in prison, and you want power, authority, a safe shelter, then collaborate with us. It's as simple as that.
Are they being promised that are going to govern in Gaza or that they're going to have a future role there?
You had the deputy of that gang, basically the de facto leader on the ground, Ghassan Haney, giving an interview to an Israeli newspaper, to Baruch Yadid, an Israeli journalist, and saying that we want to implement the Julani model. We want to do like Syria, a mini government in Rafah that later on expands more and more. They literally opened like a call for applications. It's almost like an HR firm where they are calling on Gazans, whether you're a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, whatever profession, whatever age, you can apply here.
We have been seeing and reporting on some groups protesting against Hamas, which shows people just fed up with the war, fed up with the way that things are right now. But could Israel's plan in backing Abu Shabab backfire against it by uniting the people against Abu Shabab and even behind Hamas?
Yeah, absolutely. It is already backfiring against Israel in that particular way you mentioned. Hamas's government in Gaza is autocratic. But now, when you have a gang that is affiliated with ISIS and drug dealers and murderers that is promising to be the alternative to Hamas, then that only gives legitimacy and lends credence to Hamas's security forces as the defenders of Gaza. It basically garners them more support on a popular level. The other thing is what Israel itself fears. So Avigdor Lieberman, when he spilled the beans, previous to his statement that Israel was arming ISIS in Gaza, there was a military censor ban on any mention of this apparatus happening. So Israel, it always claims to have free media. It's rather the opposite. There's something called the military censor. Every year, they ban almost about 2,000 topics from being published. They can even ban journalists from telling these things to someone over the phone that is outside of Israel. And if you violate the ban, you would be imprisoned, and there would be a ban on any mention of you being in prison. Like, it's thorough, it's meticulous. Avigdor Lieberman blew it off. He violated the rules. He didn't know, basically. But when he uncovered this, his concern is that there is a chance they would turn against us. Those people are ISIS.
And what is their connection to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? Who are these people that we are seeing in those videos at the distribution points who are covered? Their faces are covered. Who are these people? Are they Abu Shabab or are they GHF or who are they exactly?
So basically, it's two layers there. You have one layer of American mercenaries. Behind them are Israeli troops and tanks. And then you have another layer of subcontractors. There's a mainstream media journalist that told me that the Abu Shabab gang were present at the site of the massacre on Sunday, the first massacre that we saw on a mass scale. When another massacre unfolded and we got witnesses saying that it was militant gang members that fired at us, the Abu Shabab gang denied it and said, no, it was not us. We're not working with GHF. We're not there, to create some ambiguity. But you decide which one is more credible.
Is there any fear that a war, confrontation, whatever you want to call it, between Hamas and Abu Shabab is going to break out? Or a civil war of sorts even?
So you have a number of experts that are warning that the direction these things are going into is basically civil war. A gang that's trying to build up using food in a famine-stricken area and telling people, come and join us, you will get food, you will get a better life if you join. You will not be bombed by Israel if you come to this concentration camp in eastern Rafah. You are bound to find some desperate people that will join out of survival instinct. Today, Shabab's deputy claimed that their numbers grew from 300 to 500 within a record time. We saw yesterday an incident in which Hamas militants tried to ambush the Abu Shabab gang. And then the Abu Shabab gang engaged in a fire exchange with them. And then the IDF rushed to the area with a drone and bombed the Hamas militants. It was covered in Israeli newspaper I-24, where they basically said that this is the first case that they know of in which the IDF rushes to the rescue of those gangs. But there is a number of similar incidents. They've been happening for over a year now on record, where every time there's an aid convoy going into Gaza, those gang members would rush to loot it. The police or volunteers with sticks would approach to prevent the looting, and then the IDF would bomb the volunteers immediately, a coordinated attack.
The use of these armed gangs is considered to be controversial in Israel as well. So, how did the government manage to get away with this for so long, and how is their collaboration with known criminals being perceived? To talk about this, I'm joined by Michael Milstein, head of the Palestinian Studies Forum at the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies at Tel Aviv University. What information do you have about how long Israel has been backing Abu Shabab, this group, and what activities are they performing for the Israeli army?
As I understand, the relations with this gang actually began after Israel took control over Rafah area a year ago and occupied actually Rafah. Rafah itself, the city where most of the Abu Shabab clan live. Since this event, actually a vacuum was created in Rafah area, and this vacuum was actually an opportunity for Abu Shabab to create kind of autonomy or enclave protected by Israel and to promote a challenge to Hamas. And since the end of last year of 2024, we saw a lot of clashes between Abu Shabab and Hamas, and all kind of very problematic moves like robbery and looting convoys of humanitarian aid by Abu Shabab. The most dramatic steps of relations between Israel and Abu Shabab militia were promoted after the ceasefire ended 3 months ago, when Israel actually gave protection and supported the militia by ammunition, weapons. And right now we speak about this gang, about its control over the eastern parts of Rafah, only this part in Gaza. And they are used by Israel as a player, as a proxy, which actually protects the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Of course, right now I cannot really argue that it is a project full of successes, because it seems that there are many gaps and many problems in the GHF and in the case of the Abu Shabab gang.
The GHF has obviously been widely criticized. We are seeing dozens of Palestinians being killed at distribution points. And that's what makes this more complicated, right? Because there are people in masks shooting at civilians. We don't know who they are. Are they GHF? Are they private contractors? Are they Abu Shabab? Are they Hamas?
It is very suspicious. I mean, there is no clear plan about it. It was a project, very bizarre one, promoted by the general who functioned as the military secretary of Prime Minister with other businessmen and military advisors. It's obvious that there were several problems, several clashes between IDF and Palestinians in several sites, but I'm not sure that, all the narratives and all the descriptions of Hamas, of course, are accurate. Of course, they got their own interest to exaggerate about several things. But by the way, there was a very complicated event. There was a report about shooting of Hamas against one of the buses that took workers of the GHF in Khan Yunis area. And the report was about between 5 to 6 Palestinians who were murdered, several were kidnapped by Hamas. But, when you check the whole story, you see that it is much more complicated, because in the Palestinian media, you understand that several of those Palestinians who were Abu Shabab members who were executed brutally by Hamas. The main problem from my point of view is that the whole project of GHF is full of mess. And I spoke with several Palestinians who were there, in the 4 stations of distribution of humanitarian aid. They told me, listen, there is one big chaos over there, because, you can be even Hamas member and you can get into this side and you can take whatever you want.
What is in it for the group itself? What is the benefit for the group itself to be used in this way and to be widely hated and seen as traitors by the people in Gaza?
I must be frank enough and admit that I'm very critical toward the Israeli policy during the last 3 months in Gaza, because I argue that there is no strategy. I do not really understand what is the precise goal and how can you promote, for example, both goals of defeating Hamas and releasing the hostages and implementing Trump's vision about Gaza. And as I understand, the basic target regarding Abu Shabab project is actually to create a kind of a split between the people and the Hamas. And there are even several people here in Israel who are speaking about creating all kinds of Emirates ruled by clans in Gaza. And, I'm very concerned because of that, because it seems to me much more fantasies and illusions about the future of Gaza, and by the way, also the future of the West Bank, instead of realistic policy. I'm very much afraid that Israel creates a kind of Lebanese-style swamp in Gaza, full of militias. And unfortunately, I do not really understand how project or moves like the GHF and like the Abu Shabab project really bring us to gradual dying and defeat of Hamas. There is no very clear explanation here in Israel about the method itself.
So you don't think that Abu Shabab is a realistic alternative to Hamas in Gaza?
This is a kind of a branch of the Tarabin tribe, the Bedouin one from Sinai. Abu Shabab cannot be an alternative to Hamas all over Gaza Strip because their influence is very limited to the eastern parts of Rafah. For example, they don't have any impact in Gaza City itself or in Bet Lahia and Bet Hanun and other places. There is the very problematic reputation of Abu Shabab. I mean, Yasser Abu Shabab, he is not a Robin Hood of the Palestinians. He's a criminal. Basically, Phil Nada, that this adventure, this is the right term, this adventure of creating a gang and using a proxy and ignoring its basic DNA. And I'm asking myself, I'm a historian, and I'm asking myself, did we, the Israelis, learn about or learn the right lessons from our history and even things that happened only a year ago? A year ago, Israel tried to create relations with the clans in Gaza City, mainly Durmush family in Gaza City, and it ended with a tragic manner after Hamas executed several of its senior figures. And I'm also asking myself, and I also described it in an article I published this week, did we learn all the lessons from October the 7th? In October the 7th, we had the conceptia, misconception, and there were no other voices, and there was no criticism, nothing. And I really hope that this time there were other voices in Israel about this adventure of Abu Shabab, because once again, I'm really afraid that it will lead us to disaster.
We've been following this story and more at thenationalnews.com. This episode was produced by Ban Barqawi and audio engineered by Arthur Edison. Dua Farid is your editor, and I'm your host, Nada Al-Tahir. Thank you for listening.